the only unbought and unbossed politician. Why should I step back?
This is Unbought Power Hour with Rasha Mubarak.
Hey, girl!
Hey!
Yeah, this is some crispy quality. I don't know if it's the lighting or if I just look this good.
You always look this good. Sabaho!
Thank you.
How are you?
It's so pretty and pink. I'm good for you.
Yo, do you see my sweater though?
We love to see it. We love to see it.
Shayef Keef.
Shayef
Keef.
That's gorgeous. Ready for mine?
Oh my god, I love it. Leo, I was like, should I message him to like coordinate? But then I was like, nah,
You have to do it.
It's gonna be magic. I know it. Look. How are you?
Good. How are you? Can you hear me fine? Because I can get headphones too.
I think you sound fine.
Okay.
Let's ask folks y'all, is our audio good?
Are we good? Can y'all hear me? I'm seeing hearts, so I guess that's a yes.
Okay. So, Sabah al-Khair, how's Chicago?
Girl, a mess.
Not more than Florida, so.
Well, there was like a Black Lives Matter protest last night, and no matter how big or small it is now, the mayor just kind of like blocks roads off, and we needed like jail support and Black Lives Matter folks who were arrested. So yeah, Lori Lightfoot, we can get into all that later, but Chicago, it's been a rough ride, but a beautiful and powerful rough ride.
There's like so much power in pain, especially when you're working towards this collective liberation.
Absolutely.
Which we're here to talk about.
That's all I want for my birthday.
Wait, what?
Oh no, I wrote an article. So
happy belated, by the way. I was like such a jerk. Like I was like 4 days later. I was like, happy birthday.
Girl, it's like 2 weeks late, but whatever. No, I just wrote an article for Rampant Magazine. They published my speech for the Pride protest this year that I helped sort of organize, because we didn't want another Pride incorporated. We didn't want the mainstream Pride thing. It was canceled. We were like, well, this creates a vacuum, and we can get into all that later. But like, my speech was entitled "All I Want Is Collective Liberation" for my birthday, and everyone.
Oh yeah, I remember. You even
everyone's like
made sure that they didn't like change the title, right? Like that they kept it how you wanted.
Absolutely, yeah. So that was cool, but I was just, it's a joke, because like anytime someone's like happy birthday, and I'm like, all I want is collective liberation. That's all I want. Give me all the presents.
Yeah. And me too. I'll take gifts on behalf of you.
On behalf of Sam.
Look, my birthday is on El Nakba. So if anyone, yeah, I cried the first time I found out. And I was like, why didn't you name me something political? And my mom was like cracking up. She's like, Shu and Samiki Nakba? Like,
I'm so glad. We named you Catastrophe because you
I'm like Palestine, something.
Whoa.
But yeah, I've learned to channel like all of that into making sure that we're centered.
Right. The energy's there.
Yeah. So welcome to my Unbought Power Hour. Like, I'm so excited for you because I feel like you legitimately represent what it means to be unbought, right?
Right.
All the different layers and identities that you carry, and how many times we can. The whole point of Unbought, it comes from making sure we recommit ourselves to people like Shirley Chisholm, who was able to gain political power as the first Black congresswoman, but she did it without taking corporate money, you know, making sure she challenges the status quo. So I always, you know, in 2018, I had a lot of trauma in the governor's race where they were like, oh, we're so progressive, except for Palestine, y'all can stay over here, you know, just take it down a notch. We're trying to win for other folk. So I think you understand that so much more than a lot of folks, and how, you know, we're going to talk about pink washing today, right? So how that's been like, and how in many spaces, even progressive spaces, we're marginalized, right? So, you know, wherever you want to start, talk to us about, like,
Lord have mercy.
Doing a lot of work, by the way, like, I've seen your beautiful PowerPoint. Like, you're not just organizing, not just in the streets, you're not just a face in the media, not just a spokesperson, but you're legitimately organizing, mobilizing, educating, and training folks, and understanding the language and why so problematic to really overlook this concept and how pink washing is implemented in Israel and how that translates into the work here.
Thank you so much, Rasha. First of all, y'all, I've only met Rasha once, and it was at the US CPR conference, and she looked so boss, and I was so, you were like walking all up in there. I was like, who is this?
I was remembering that today. I was like, oh my God. And I was like, can you take a picture? Like, make sure you get like a lighting. And
oh my God. Oh yeah, you made me take a photo of you and Mark Lamont Hill and
oh, Nuda though. Remember we were in like Escaped outside the ballroom, and we were like, Nuda and I both had the same good size, so it wasn't working out.
It was really funny. Yeah, what is it, the left side or something? And I was like, oh my God, did somebody take this photo?
Not everyone's like you where you have both good sides. Okay.
Side by far, absolutely no. We're not gonna even go there. But but anyway, I wanted to say you have a very present energy, a very kind energy, just yes, very kind person, and I'm very humbled to have met you. I still have that little video of us when we were like karaokeing, probably.
Oh my God!
Mariah Carey in the hotel room
with Jam. Do you remember? That was so beautiful.
Yeah.
That's probably the best night.
Like, then I love when it's like that in like movement building, when it's just like you see, I'm like, okay, you're cool, all right, okay, follow me. Oh, okay, bye, girl. See you like at the next one ever.
Yeah. It was super organic, and like honestly,
yeah.
Those are the moments that I carry, and those are actually people that resonate with me the most. Because sometimes it's hard in these spaces, even amongst our own communities, right? Like,
especially when you are in a position of hyper visibility. We are all human, and we all feel things, and one of the biggest things that I feel like we don't really check as much is like projecting. You know, I've been in spaces where I'm like, dude, like the last time I was at a conference, I was like 21, 22, and I had like people who were like 30 being like, oh my God, that's like Walacha. I mean, I'm just like, I am so nervous and so scared. Really, I'm a guy that like plays video games like 8 hours a day. Like,
you're like such a humble bumblebee, and I think that's why, you just like your presence, your work, but also like you as a person land with so many people. Like, I have to tell you, I put our little flyer up, and people are like, I'm gonna put this on my calendar. Like, they're like super excited. They have never met you, but they've seen you just like via Instagram, and how impactful you've been, but also how entertaining it is to have you, especially in this world that we're living in right now, right?
Absolutely. So I was gonna go somewhere with this, but anyway, I was gonna say one last quick thing before I start, is that my dear friend Khaled, who essentially has been like a queer mentor to me.
Okay.
He's queer Palestinian. He was like the first one I ever met, one of the only ones I know. And he's literally, this is mom. Khaled's mom.
Aww.
And he has a quote that I always love to share when people are always like hyping me up or I'm hyping someone else up. And it's that we are all reflections of each other. And I love that so much. So when everyone's always like, oh my God, you're so amazing, you do this, you do that. And I'm like, I mean, you validate it because like you see me for the work that I'm doing, which means I'm doing the work I'm doing because I see you. So really like taking that back to that like collective affirmation of like, I really don't want to go High School Musical on this, but like,
no, but go for it. I'm all about it right this morning. I love it.
So before I ever start anything, I always have like decolonial, whether it's a workshop, a teach-in, at a protest, and I usually break it down into 4 points. The first point is that this talk or this presentation or whatever, this is being given on occupied, stolen land.
Right.
Number one. And that comes from a place of like land acknowledgement. And I don't do it to be like this like liberal, to be like, we are on stolen land. Like, no, it's like, I want people to treat Palestinians in the way that I treat them. So I am kind, I am challenging, but at the same time, I am like progressing in a lot of my political beliefs. And one of the biggest things is like to acknowledge the existence of indigenous people, whether that is the indigenous people of this land and the indigenous nations of this land, or the indigenous people of Palestine.
That's right.
So land acknowledgements mean a lot to me. The second reminder is that this is the 72nd year of illegal occupation. No, is it more than 72? It might be thrown off now.
I think it might be 73. I don't know.
We'll do the math later. Fact check it later.
Someone's gonna be like,
So, oh no. Whatever. It's the 70-something year occupation of Palestine by Israeli settlers. And we have only gotten to this point by the collective action of the rest of the world. So for Israel to continue existing, people are permitting the existence of this military base on stolen indigenous Palestinian land. And what you permit, you promote.
That's right.
Number 3, the Israeli occupation of Palestine is modern day colonization. That's the fucking tweet. Oh, sorry, can I curse?
Oh, you're good.
I am unbought. You cannot censor.
Right.
It's modern day fucking colonization. That's the tweet. Unpack the rest on your own. And the last one is that because this is pinkwashing, it's a reminder that there is no country on this planet that does not have a serious problem with homophobia and transphobia.
That's real.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like I'm with you right now. Like we're literally in the same physical space. So like, thank you for like creating that. I appreciate it. And I'm sure folks on there appreciate it.
For sure.
And it's 72, by the way.
I don't even drink coffee, but you do this coffee thing, so I have a little French press.
Oh no! Did you get your coffee? By the way, I sent that to you anyway, so feel free to give it to a friend. Did you not receive it yet?
I didn't check my mail. Is it?
Okay, well, it's gonna look like this.
Look, that's so cute.
Next one will be your picture.
Okay, that's really adorable. I'll check my mail after this. I'm sorry, I didn't know it was like mailed.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna do my little thing.
Oh.
Watch out, everyone. She's fancy.
Here's my cortadito.
Oh, I love a good cortadito. Okay, you have a good cute cup like me. So this was made for me. It has my name on it in Arabic.
Oh, where was that made?
A friend of a friend makes it in St. Louis, like pottery. So
love it.
I'll get one for you.
Like love it. May 15th. You can never forget.
Sahtan.
Oh wait, I have to grab it.
Like clank.
Yellow. Come on, madam.
Bloop.
Pop.
To liberation. To collective liberation.
I mean, amen.
Amen. I mean, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad.
Yes.
Somebody, give it to us. So I have to say, I've never done anything like this.
Really?
So I haven't. So
I feel like Tajana was here because, like, I feel like you are the IG queen, you know. So I was like,
where's my crap? I mean, we can do it however you want to do it. I usually have like an overview.
Yeah, like go for it. You are my guest, so like you take up as much space. Please.
Okay.
People want to hear from you.
Okay, great. I'm here to
hear
about.
Yeah.
So the first thing is I always have an about me, and then I have like instruction for hecklers, but I don't like presume there are hecklers. But if there are, catch me outside. I have an explanation on like anti-Zionism versus anti-Semitism or like anti-Jewish sentiment. Then I talk a lot about brand Israel and what brand Israel is. And then I got that B-way into an intro to pinkwashing. Did you wear pink because it's pinkwashing? That just clicked.
You know what? This is a crazy story. My friend ordered a sweater. I was like, I need that sweater. I ordered it the next day. It came in, and I was like, what is this? And I like looked, and it had like an Orlando address, and I was like, there's dope people that have Palestine sweaters in Orlando. And then I was like, yo, I'm gonna wear this on Sunday because it's pink. So yeah, it was a whole bunch of combinations.
Okay. And then I highlight pinkwashing organizations and where they get their funds from. Always follow the money. This is about being unbought. Let's follow the money of people who are bought.
That's right.
And then looking under the Hasbara hood, we'll get into that section maybe. And then essentially like at the end of this, I kind of just like expose pinkwashing. I'm just like, it's not real. Like this is all fake. And this is just like tourism for rich gay people. And then, yeah, like calls to action. I think calls to action are really important. I think especially now because it's like, it is important to know things. It is important to know things. However, there is this level of discipline that's required when you are an organizer, a teacher, working in electoral politics, where you cannot allow cynicism or being cynical to take over. However, if it happens, it's okay, and we're human, and I like to leave room for that. But at the end of the day, like, we're all here for similar reasons. And if you truly believe in collective liberation, it means approaching issues with a sense of urgency and just being like, no, I'm not gonna, don't make it about yourself. I think is like the biggest thing. I'm just like, what was me kind of stuff. But I also can hold space for that. I also understand where it comes from. So calls to action are important.
I'm all about it. There always has to be like an ask at the end. Like also like, it's okay to vent. It's okay to like be upset. But there should always be some kind of going back to the roots of like, well, how do we fix this? How do we continue to build together? Right. So I'm all about that. I'm excited. This is like, you should be charging people for this.
I'm done. Oh, there we go. How did you know I was Palestinian? And it's like, here's my IG crown.
I love it. Yo, there you go. There's your mic.
So just a quick thing about me. I received my bachelor's at St. Xavier University. I am a member of CCHIRP, which is Chicago Committee for the Human Rights in the Philippines. So I do a lot of joint solidarity work with folks from the Philippines. As we know, this is one of the first times in history that the Philippines is establishing a relationship with Israel. And when we talk about relationship, it can only mean one thing, and it's a military relationship. Under the Philippines' current dictator, Duterte. So just doing like joint solidarity, things like that, and truly showing up as a Palestinian for folks in the Philippines, and letting them know that I see them. But also like going beyond just like surface level, like solidarity. It's really like education, teach-ins. As a Palestinian person, like my body being present in their spaces, beyond solidarity, like truly just like joint struggle work, being like, we have to move forward together. Right. And, I work 2 jobs. Oh, I'm also a member of PYM, Palestinian Youth Movement.
Hello.
Woo-hoo! If you're Palestinian or Arab, apply to join. And I'm also, so I work 2 jobs. I am a research assistant at UIC, so I research HIV, the relationship between HIV and gay or bisexual immigrant Arab men. Mouthful, I know, but like it's like that for a reason. And it's super important work because we really don't talk about gender or sexuality in Arab spaces. 1, we struggle to have the language and use the language correctly. 2, we are at the intersection of like Western misogyny and also like religious misogyny in these spaces, and it really puts like a gag on progressing with this type of language. So I do that kind of research.
I just want to say, like, that's such important work. When I read that, I was like, yeah, this is going to go in the bio piece because I think it's touched upon enough, and the fact that like it's so specific to the work that you're doing, the Arab men and HIV and all of that, because that's something. 1, we don't talk about sexuality. 2, we don't talk about that because of how people is negative perception of it, right? As far as who gets it, it's
right.
In,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's unfortunate because like, well, the study is led by Dr. Sada Aboud. So of course it's an Arab woman doing these studies.
Love it.
Pushing these like paradigms for conversations in our spaces. And she brought me on as a research assistant. But yeah, I remember being like a queer baby, being like 19, 20 years old, and like going to these like gay spaces and being surrounded by a lot of brown and black queer men, mostly like Black and Latinx and some Asian men. And I was the only Arab ever in these spaces. And I would start to realize like a lot of HIV research, like they would have statistics on every group except Arabs. And I was just like, I don't know what this means for me or like anyone in my community moving forward.
Yeah.
And that was 4 or 5 years ago. And now I got added to the study somehow. I burped, sorry. Somehow. So I'm really humbled and honored to do that work. And I think it can mean a lot of great things for our community. But unfortunately, because of the taboo and because of like multiple marginal identities, like men are the most accessible population in our community to do this research on. And that doesn't mean that women don't suffer from STD community. It's an unseen force that is causing a lot of harm. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, I'm just a housing navigator at this nonprofit. I just help people find housing. And I'm like the other one that pays the bills. It's a good job, though. I go by Sammer the Sodomite. Sometimes. Sammer the Sodomite. And I am a hardline anti-Zionist. I am Muslim. I am
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. I can spit. I got bars, baby.
That's a whole new ID line.
All right, my favorite rap album's the Quran.
Oh my god. That's thugs.
So yeah, I'm a speaker, educator, lecturer, organizer. And talk to me afterward. So the first thing is anti-Zionism versus anti-Semitism. They are not the same thing, shockingly.
This is so important because I come from the state of Florida where they passed
tale old as time. Like, I want to like bang my head against the wall. I'm like, this only happens because there's money behind this. This only happens for a reason. Conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, it's not being like uneducated. It's not being like misunderstood. It is a political agenda. And as we saw with Donald Trump's executive order, the conflation of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism was a political agenda. It's now been realized on U.S. campuses. But guess what, bitch? COVID happened, so it doesn't even matter. So you tried. So anti-Zionism is a noun. It's a thing. It's a concept. It is the opposition to Zionism. It's in the fucking word, you know, anti-Zionism.
Right.
Which means things, right? Anti means you are in opposition to this belief, Zionism.
I'm loving this breakdown, please. This is so important for folks.
This can take many forms and is included but not limited to: 1, criticism of policies and governments by the Israeli government or the Zionist entity of Israel. 2, opposition to the existence of the, quote, state of Israel on political grounds. 3, opposition to like settler colonial occupation of Palestinian people. So if you support Palestinians, you're anti-Zionist, like in here.
If you support human rights and they have to be Palestinian,
wake up. If
you are anti-Zionist.
If you're watching this and you support us and you're like a little shook on like whether, baby, you're on this side and you're on the right side. Yeah. And the last thing is really just like, you are an anti-Zionist if you believe that you have the right to criticize or oppose Jewish ethno-nationalism, particularly in Southwest Asia. Anti-Semitism, which is also a noun, is hostility or discrimination against Jewish people on the basis of religious, ethnic, or racial signifiers. It is purely the hatred of Jews. And that's not okay or tolerated. However, they are completely different things. They can be mutually exclusive. And honestly, it is an apple and a banana. And I can say I support Palestine, and I don't have to clarify that being anti-Zionist, because that's like you, Rasha, being like, I like apples, and that's me being like, well, what about bananas? One of the things about this being political...
That when people over-communicate that or try to over-clarify, you're feeding into this narrative that's
wasted time.
That's meant to, like...
I want to take all the time we've spent trying to explain this stuff. Oh my God, like, what's the number? How many minutes have we wasted explaining that we're not, like, anti-Semitic or that anti-Zionism is... I'm doing it right now, so I'm gonna, like, move past it, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, sorry.
No, Boo, this is you.
But really, when we fall into that trap, that's part of the political agenda. Whataboutism is a political agenda. Whataboutism is one of the greatest tools white supremacists have. Black Lives Matter. Well, what about all lives matter? It's a political agenda. These people know what they're doing. They're not like, oh, well, I'm confused. What about... No, baby, you're a Nazi. And we see, it's time like in 2020, we need to like see through these tactics. It's a tactic that's working.
It's also very exhausting to like continue to like having to break that down, but like, yeah. I'm always happy to if it's gonna help like clear the air for y'all.
Yeah.
But also I just think that like we are beyond this time where folks need to just be able to... I live in a state, where they passed the anti-Semitism bill unanimously. and they were vocal. They were so proud about it. It was where it equated the criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. Wait for it. Where you criminalize Palestinian activists, folks that are vocal on Palestine, specifically students. Did you hear what's happening to the FSU president and the Palestinian? Yeah, so this is a dangerous rhetoric. This is not only like, so people conflating that, equating that, that doesn't make you more inclusive of the Jewish people. In many ways, it's anti-Semitism in itself. But I'm gonna let you.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Like, do you think that the Jewish community has survived genocide?
Right.
And what happened in Europe has nothing to do with me as a Palestinian.
That's right.
So to shift that blame onto me, my identity is not defined by like Jewish solidarity or like by me constantly like walking around and being like, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm sorry, that's not what being Palestinian is. Being Palestinian is being a community. Being Palestinian is having a mother that taught me like basic like how to be like a human effing being, like to respect other humans and to respect land and to respect what the land gave me. Like being Palestinian means I hold these indigenous beliefs, and also like being Palestinian modern day, I guess now also means that I like am also fighting for other people. The same way that Black Lives Matter now is, I want people to understand like they're fighting for all of us.
That's right. Like, when you fight for Black liberation, you're fighting for liberation of the Palestinians, of indigenous, of LGBTQ folk, of the Latinx immigrant. And I don't think people understand that. So when just like a year ago, saying Black Lives Matter or taking a knee wasn't digestible, now it's like what people are doing to like make sure that they're not called a racist. Like look at how things can change overnight. And also they always say never talk about what you are not. So you're never going to go around saying, I'm not racist, I'm not anti-Semitic, right? Like
I'm like, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
But yeah, this belittling this like of being Palestinian, I'm like, I'm not defined by this conversation. I am more than that. So anyway, I think what I think is anti-Semitic is that the rest of the world decided that they should shift the Jewish population from Europe and give them their own country in the Middle East so that they don't have to deal with anti-Semitism in Europe anymore. That's what I think is anti-Semitic. Is that restorative justice? No. Was there anything restorative happen after World War II or after the Holocaust? No. So that's anti-Semitic to me. So go talk to Germany and France and Britain about anti-Semitism before you talk to Palestinians about it. And that's what I'm gonna say.
The Palestinians, we're Jewish people. Like, let's talk about that for a second. Just since
we are in many senses.
You know, Jewish people live in Palestine, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, where they actually had businesses together. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't something that like there was beef back then. Like, they actually,
it was only chicken.
they slaughtered their charups together, right? Like, yeah,
absolutely. And even before like identities became solidified, whether it be through like nationalism, land, or religion, like people, like populations intermingled and crossed, and I'm sure like marriages happen and things like that. So like people want to hold on to the way people interact with the past is really revisionist. Mm-hmm. And that's another one of the tools and tactics that Zionists use. They revise history to be like, well, Israel's in the Bible and we've always been here. Bitch, those are not the same people. They are long gone, baby. They are buried. They were not the same type of Jews as you. Just like the Philistines that are mentioned in the Bible aren't the same as me. Like, they're not these groups of people. The Canaanites that you used to claim power and validity over this land are gone. These societies are gone. They're gone, bitch. like the Philistines in the Bible, like they ate pork and didn't circumcise. I'm Palestinian and I don't eat pork and I'm circumcised. Like there's
Palestinian Christians.
Like identities are socially constructed. You can't go in the past and be like, we've always been here. No, like shut up. So yeah, like the use of anti-Semitism is really Uranius. Like it's just this thing they use to silence us. So I'm gonna shift past this conversation to exposing pinkwashing.
Please.
Why I'm here today. Finally gotten into it. So pinkwashing pride. Yeah, this is pinkwashing is nothing to be proud of. So I really want to like punch some holes in the flawless LGBTQ image that the Israeli government tries to portray that they are. Um, the first is that, so I have my own beef with this, but it's like you'd think that for a country that models itself after Western democracy, um, would allow same-sex marriage, right? You know, like it's, you know, America had it, Australia has it, or has it, not had it. You know, like we pretend to care about gay people, we let them marry each other. Well, Israel doesn't. So even in this like pseudo like pinkwashing narrative, like Israel can't even measure up to be like performative in the way that the US and Australia and other Western countries. But that's because America is the most performative country in the world anyway. So that's
Yeah.
like a topic. So another thing is that Israel has their own version of the RFRA, which means that individuals who claim to be homosexual or queer or trans violate their own religious beliefs. It's let me step back. The RFRA,
I got the breakdown.
yeah, the RFRA is what allows doctors and businesses to be like, if you're queer or trans, you violate my religious beliefs, so I am allowed to refuse service to queer people, queer and trans people. So Israel has their own version of that. And of course, this stuff always gets taken to court in the US, but essentially like under this administration, these rights have been like, you know, dismantled. Um, so in Israel, if you are queer or trans, a Jewish business can literally be like, this is an invasion of like my Judaism. I don't have to service you. And in many cases, we know this is harmful in the medical industrial complex. Like this is why queer people have this horrible relationship with with public health, the ways that we do. And Arabs, and in a very long story, I know this is like separate from queerness, but as Arab, we have a very poor relationship with public health, similarly to Black folks, because the medical industry in settler colonial countries was weaponized against us, tested things on us. And right now, and against political prisoners in the US who are Black, and in Palestine who are Palestinian in Israeli jail cells, they test things on us. So that creates a poor relationship with public health. So to be queer and Palestinian also means we lie at this intersection of public health of being both queer and Arab. So it compounds. Another thing that like my really good friend Stephanie Skora, who is Jewish and is like the most amazing queer person, Stephanie is able to like break things down like methodologically, and basically is like Israel's LGBTQ rights record compares negatively to most Western countries, which is why they only make comparisons to the Middle East. Southwest Asia. So if you ever pay attention to like queer stuff, they never.
It goes back. It goes along with their narrative of the only democratic country in the Middle East, right?
Yeah, like we are worse than most countries in the world, but look over there. We're better than Jordan when gay people, but it's like, but you're not better than anyone else. Like,
yeah.
So many of the same organizations in the U.S. and elsewhere provide major funding to Israel, and the Israeli government are intensely homophobic and transphobic themselves. Who's number one? The U.S. So
there you go.
So we'll get into the funding a little bit later, but like there are actual like politicians and organizations that are like right-wing Republicans that like want to like murder queer people, but will like donate to like Israel's like.
Makes zero sense.
Right. It makes zero sense, but then it makes a lot of sense when we get into it. So pinkwashers are often often charge anti-pinkwashing activists with intentionally disregarding or dishonoring like the activism of queers and trans people. And what this does is it really dishonors the legacy of activists that do that work on the ground. And pinkwashing is a deliberate attempt to erase the efforts of queer and trans Palestinian activists. One of the biggest ones is Al-Qaws in Palestine and in 48, doing the work to push our community. Our people are pushing ourselves on transphobia, on misogyny, on homophobia, on queer antagonism. We are doing that work in our community. And it's hard. And I'm sure so many people from Alcaus have sacrificed so much in the same ways that I've sacrificed being visible and queer in the US.
Right.
For many reasons, to do this work. And what happens? How do they undermine us? Well, they just flood a bunch of money into campaigns to undermine us. So I'm sorry, but like gay white men vacationing in Tel Aviv does nothing for queer people, like in Palestine.
Right.
That is what pinkwashing is. You have washed over the work that we have done.
And literally not only washing over, but on undoing the work that folks are
literally uprooting this work that we have tried to, like, you know, sow the seeds of. So again, intentionality, follow the money, understand more in a more complicated and intricate way how these campaigns work and why. So the way that Israel does this is through Brand Israel. And Brand Israel is an organization that is funded by the Israeli government itself. It's an initiative. And it started like this. In order to de-scary Israel and Westerners, the Israeli government had to create a campaign that appealed to the people broadly.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's really genius if you think about it.
It's genius under capitalism. So it's
right. But like in a way that they're just this performative surface,
right.
lying, like people are eating up.
They were like, how could we do this and also make money?
Right.
Right.
Oh.
So, well, they're sitting at this table and they're like, well, what's one trendy group of people that have a lot of money and love to vacation and explicitly look for places that market themselves as safe to this group?
Mm-hmm.
Queer people. But particularly cisgender gay men. Like, cisgender gay men love to vacation. It's just a thing. And that's why you'll realize that a majority of pinkwashing agenda centers and targets cis gay men and the experience of cis gay men in Israeli cities. Every time I open up Grindr, there's like a pinkwashing ad. Like, come to Tel Aviv, like, and the ad is like two very muscular gay men, like, so it really
it's like tugging on their heartstrings of like, oh,
like, look, this is for you particularly, give us your money. And so that ties into another point of like an ethnocratic state that tries to maintain a demographic majority of white Jewish citizens will inevitably endow its citizens with the highest forms of privilege while disadvantaging others. So white gay men, both in the US and in Israel, of course, are endowed like rights and privileges at whose expense? At the expense of gay Palestinian men and women and queer Palestinian folks, and also like cis heterosexual Palestinians. Like, this is built on our suffering. Like, gay men from other parts of the world get to come to vacation on the beach, on stolen land, on a beach of Tel Aviv that was originally Palestinian land, because you expelled the Palestinians from that land.
Right.
So if this was a formula, the expulsion of Palestinians has to fit somewhere in that formula.
There's no taking it out.
There's no we can't.
It's there and you're amplifying.
Exactly. God, this coffee tastes so good. I put a sprinkle of cinnamon and also like.
Oh my God, you're like my mom. She puts
I'm such a mom coffee because my mom taught me like coffee.
Yeah.
Like,
and she put like a dash of kumfrol. Do you know those things that like smell really good?
The little black things.
Yeah.
What are they called in English?
I don't.
Whatever. Really strong. I used to do that too, which is really funny. But now I used to do a little bit of rose water.
Yeah.
I saw someone in the chat ask what cis means. CIS, cis means it is a signifier of someone who identifies with the gender that they are born, or that they are assigned when they are born. So when someone with a vagina is born, they are assigned the gender of female. And some people don't agree with that, and they're like, gender is a social construct. I don't identify with being a female. I am a male, or I am gender non-binary. That means they are no longer cis. Mm-hmm. But people that identify as cis are typically just, people that operate within the binary of gender, male and female. So there's that. So here's an intro to pinkwashing. Pinkwashing is a term that refers to the use of Israel's supposed... Oh, wait, I have to backtrack. I'm so sorry, Dasha. So Brand Israel, what happened, the way it happened was the way they realized that they needed to de-scary Israel is that they did a sociological project where they brought a bunch of gay men to be interviewed. And they're like, when you think about Greece, what do you think? And everyone was like, oh, those beautiful homes with the blue rooftops and beautiful Mediterranean food and blah, blah, blah. And because Israel is located in the Mediterranean, they focused on that. So they were like, well, when you think of Morocco, what do you think? And they're like, oh my God, the beautiful Mediterranean, blah, 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 blah. When you think of Italy, what do you envision? Oh my God, the beautiful olive oil and the grapevines and ma'absar shu, all these stereotypes. So then they're like, okay, what do you think of Israel? And they're like, war and like a wall and like these gray walls that are being built in Israel and blah, blah, blah. So they're like, okay, so people don't vacate. We don't have a booming tourism industry because of our reputation of being at war constantly. So they just rebranded.
Wait, your connection is fuzzy.
Hello?
You're still there, but
Oh no.
You're not as flawless. Now you're just like fuzzy. Hold on.
You know what happens sometimes, the internet.
Okay. Better.
Okay. So yeah, that's just how it happened. They just did like a qualitative and quantitative experiment, and yeah, they're like, yeah, we have to change the way people view Israel. So that's why they all of a sudden after like the year 2000, you start seeing like the Baha'i gardens and all of these ads and travel.com, like establishing these relationships and establishing a tourist industry.
So pinkwashing is there's twofold. It's one, this PR campaign to distract folk from understanding the occupier's lens, and two, it's moneymaker for the tourist industry.
Yep, and that's essentially, I mean, that is capitalism.
Right.
It is maximizing
Capitalism at its finest.
It is. It's how we continue to maximize our profits as an economy, and we do that by creating a tourist industry and then breaking down the push factors of why we don't have one. So enters pinkwashing, and pinkwashing is a term that refers to the use of Israel's supposed positive record on LGBTQ human rights to distract from the occupation and the colonization of Palestine. It's part of the Brand Israel promo campaign sponsored by the Israeli government itself to change the way people view the Israeli state. And the essence of pinkwashing is to make the Zionist project appeal to queers worldwide. Mm-hmm. It's recently tried shifting people. It's actually trying to guilt trans people into supporting Israel. There's a lot of, whether it's through like social media or a lot of campaigns, they have really targeted and antagonized like trans people to be like, you have to support Israel because these savage Muslims are throwing trans people off rooftops. So what do you mean you don't support Israel? That means you don't support trans people. It's really, really, really fucking insidious, and it's really preying on vulnerable people. And as a queer person,
like people's struggles, and like they're bargaining chips, like many times using.
They are tokenizing queer people.
Yeah.
And how much longer as queer communities do we have to be tokenized by corporations, by governments? Tokenization is not liberation. It's actually really harmful and really sad to watch.
It's also very harmful towards just like the LGBTQ community when this is happening, right? Like it takes away from their cause. Like we already talked about that, but like it takes away.
Well, what it does is it depoliticizes queer people.
Right.
Rainbow Oreos and Rainbow Chipotle and Rainbow Cops. Does that sound like Stonewall? Does that sound like the ACT UP movement of the 80s and 90s when our people were literally being left to die on the street by the Reagan administration and the Clinton administration? Like, we had demands in the 80s and 90s. Queer people had demands. The biggest demand before it became mainstream was universal health care. We want access to medicine. We want access to a healthcare system that is not letting us die on the street of HIV and AIDS or in hospitals just on a hospital bed, like rotting away. So queer people had these politics long before, I'm sorry, like
they were fighting
some
for
of these
all
Democrats.
Right.
Right. Second demand, universal housing. Queer people constitute one of the largest homeless populations in this country. Queer youth are the largest demographic of homeless people in this country. Of ages, I want to say I think it's 16 to 23, 24. Over 51% are queer or trans. So that was another demand. And as you see with the ACT UP movement, it was so successful, it was so large, excuse me, that the government had no choice but to combat it. And so how do we combat that? Well, we combat it by pinkwashing. We're going to tokenize a couple of white, gay, rich men, and we're going to give them and put them in positions of power. And as time goes by, we're going to start having things like rainbow Oreos and rainbow Campbells. And people are going to be like, oh, these companies care about us. No, they fucking don't. No, they don't. They are invested in your oppression.
Right.
So really, representation and all of these things, like these campaigns are funded for a reason. They're funded because they disarm people. They make us put our weapons down and they make us look and be like, oh, like maybe I can get to that position of power. Kamala Harris, vice president, it happened. I can do that too. Yeah, I don't have to take to the streets anymore.
You gotta like, if we're gonna talk about that, you gotta like be like, hey, I don't know. I've just been really so. I don't want to get into that.
It was just a little Easter egg. I'm not gonna. But you see what I'm saying? Like seeing gay people in positions of power has disarmed a lot.
Like the fight is over. Like everything.
Right, the fight's over. We're starting to integrate into capitalism. Yeah. So just that little segue. So
but I just want to tell you, the Instagram live automatically cuts off after an hour.
Oh, how much time do we have left?
Well, if we.
Oh my God, 11 minutes! I hate it. It's off after an hour. That's kind of bogus.
You can always jump back on, but it does cut you off.
Okay, that's fine. I'll wrap it up in 11 minutes.
No.
Our fucking Zoom is the same way. Fuck y'all. Like we're not.
I always have, because I have the free Zoom account. I'm like, we have 40 minutes, folks. Like,
so insidious. But okay, so I'll break it down. So there are tropes to pinkwashing, and they are broken down into 6 tropes. So while defenders of Israel often claim that pinkwashing actually just highlights like LGBTQ culture in Israel, that can be easily disproven by the following 6 tropes. The first is that it is rooted in like Western exceptionalism and westernizing contextual claims. So queerness in Israel is Western. It is for Western people. It is defined by nightclubs and beaches and alcohol and rainbow capitalism that is not accessible to homeless Palestinians, to queer Palestinians, or to anyone else in the world. The second trope is that it's rooted in white saviorism. You know, the idea that we're the only democracy in the Middle East, that Palestinians flee the West Bank and come to Israel to be queer, which is not true. And also when you're queer and you are a Palestinian in Israel, they use that as leverage against you. They out Palestinians. 3, it's rooted in military worship. They have gay and trans Israeli soldiers tour the world to be like, look, I'm in the military. And we saw that argument recently with the U.S. military when Trump barred trans members from serving in the military. The military is the largest employer of trans people in this country, which means it's the largest healthcare provider for trans people in this country. So my question is, why should trans people have to join the fucking military to get healthcare? Why should anyone have to join the military and kill other people to have healthcare? Let's start having those conversations and those questions instead of saying trans people should serve in the military, gay people should serve in the military. No one should serve in the military, and we should all have health care. Number 4, what it really does is it appeals to Jewish supremacy by saying that, like, look at us, we are better than Arabs, we are culturally more progressive culturally, and yada, yada, yada. Like, no one, they would never use a gay Palestinian. They're so racist, they wouldn't even tokenize a gay Palestinian. They'll tokenize gay Jews, right?
Yeah, they don't even call us Palestinian. They try to use language like Arab, like Arab.
Right,
like,
they don't say Palestinian.
Yeah.
So the 5th point is they always use the roof throwing narrative, and that narrative is that's just regular old racism and Islamophobia. That's Islamophobia. If you have to say that you're helping gay people because you're not throwing them off the roof, the bar's pretty low. Like,
And that, you know, also what, you know, because a lot of people, they'll combat Islamophobia, but they won't be pro-Palestinian because it's safe. Like, oh, no Muslim land. You know, they're all about that when it comes to Palestine. But the reality is, in this work and pinkwashing and Zionism, there is so many layers of Islamophobia. So, like, you're contradicting yourself. You're not aligned with what's really happening.
Girl, clownery. Bunch of clowns. And the last point is just that it depoliticized queer and trans people, which I got into earlier. Like, these tropes, like, it reduces us to tourists. It reduces us to, like, hegemonic signifiers of just, like, to be queer, you have to look like this. And that's, like, something I struggle with a lot. Like, I'm not someone who operates within this hegemonic culture. When I go to Boys Town, which was the first gay city in the US, like, there was no one there that looked like me. Like, I'm kind of skinny, you know, like, I'm a skinny boy. I don't have abs. Like,
you're beautiful.
I am, thank you. But I'm not, like,
mashallah.
Difficult. Thank you. You too, Rasha. Reflections of each other.
Hey.
But really, like, it gets hard because it's like, not being seen for who I am, because gay people have just been depoliticized and reduced to this culture of people that go out and get drunk on the weekend.
Right.
Like, that's what Boys Town is. Like, that's what they've done to my community. They've turned my people, like, my queer community, into alcoholics and like, substance users. And there's nothing wrong with substance use, but, you know, the queer community's relationship with substance use is also, like, intentional. And in a lot of ways that, like, crack was put into Black communities. Like, a lot of this stuff is intentional.
Also, drugs being put into Palestine.
Like, they're all tactics that mirror each other. So again, this goes into, like, Western exceptionalism, and, you know, they say that we're better than Palestinians because we're a Western democracy, and really it just plays on the trope of Orientalism and as Arabs and Muslims being uncivilized people or lesser. But in reality, we had some of the most flourishing and successful democracies before Western interventionism. But really, that trope gets really complicated to analyze, because actually, if we take a step back, Israel is indeed a Western-style democracy. That means it is a democracy that's built on stolen land,
right,
while constantly denying rights to the indigenous people on that land. America, Australia, all these colonial countries, Canada, it is an imperialist military on. It's imperialist the relationships with other countries are built on, like, imperialist militaries. Like, they're not based on, like, oh, let's have a cultural exchange program, let's have an educational exchange program. It's military exchange programs. Our relationship with other countries in this world are defined by military relationships. Right. Disenfranchising brown people from voting, and Black people in the United States, both here and then Palestinians over there. So, you know, these tropes line up, these structures line up. It's like, actually, you know what?
And not by accident. This is very tactful. This is a very intentional and deliberate. This is what they're putting these things in place so that they can further marginalize, further disenfranchise. It's not just that they happen to be. This is very calculated moves that they do.
Absolutely. And I mean, even Israel's a European Union associate country. You know, they participate in Eurovision. So really what Israel is it's bringing white people to the Middle East. And Egypt, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates, when they strike these deals, all you're doing is you're saying, yes, we're going to normalize white people in the Middle East. White people in Israel are not normally in the Middle East, Swana, whatever you want to call it, Southwest Asia. That their occurrence is not normal. It's forced. It is forced. It is bringing Western capitalism into our countries by force. By what kind of force? Military force. So this trope on a deeper level is about, like, claiming queerness and transness as this inherently white and Western and good thing. And it frames homophobia as this, like, other foreign Eastern thing. And, you know, that goes hand in hand with the, like, Arabs and Muslims being civilized.
And, like, it helps them try to fly under the radar for, like, their ongoing oppression and land grab, all of that.
And so that was only one of the 6 tropes. I'm just gonna go to the last one. The pinkwashing depoliticizes queer and trans people, and I'm sorry about, like, the time. And so yeah, like, as we discussed before, like, pinkwashing material, it's all targeted at white, wealthy, cisgender gay men, and occasionally, like, white cisgender lesbians. However, like, the position that those gay people occupy in a pinkwashing narrative is really limited to like passive societal roles. And what that means is like it's what I mentioned earlier. It's like roles occupied by like white Jewish queer people in pinkwashing narratives is like the tourist or party goer, or the victim, or the class of people being protected. That it's this tiny class of people that we have to give rights to, that we're protecting. Or you know, it reduces a queer person to like the trope of being like the fun or meaningful ambassador. Like I'm the queer ambassador to this, or the queer ambassador to that, blah blah blah. Whereas like queer and trans Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims are cast exclusively as victims or sufferers, if we're even acknowledged at all. Like we're just always acknowledged as like suffering in like our homelands, which is not true. Well, not in that way. So I do have like a whole PowerPoint about this that if people just want to message me after this, I'm more than willing to share it. I share all my PowerPoints, all my knowledge, all of this is free and accessible and unbought.
Hey.
Up and failed.
I do want to say, with the 2 minutes left, is I appreciate this so much. You don't understand. Like I feel like I'm just gonna airdrop this like video into like anytime I'm in these spaces and like just have folks listen in. But I would like to say like this, I don't want people to overlook this tactic that is used, right? In 2018, the Zionist organization sent this LGBTQ gay Zionist to Orlando from DC to try to unseat me in my different capacities and try to equate, well, he's gay, so he's progressive, and like literally used that as a tool in trying to like build relationships with progressive, just because of 5 no votes against the anti-BDS legislation in 2016 of the 270 on a state level. So like it's using and folks tokenizing them, the queer community, and but also like trying to put people like against, like confusing people by like, well, he's gay, he's progressive, so like he should have a seat at the table. Like and people think, oh, we'll be inclusive, we're having a Zionist.
Well, how about this? Like, fuck the table. Like, we need to stop trying to be integrated into these systems of harm. We need to stop trying to put people in positions of power, because those positions of power are defined by oppressing another group of people. Structurally, you cannot change it. Like you got to have a big ego to think that you can like flip the coin on its head or whatever. So what we can do right now is be present on all fronts. We need to continue electing progressives. We need to continue being on the
real progressives.
real, not PEP.
Not PEP.
All right, not PEP.
Or Poops.
Palestinians. I'm talking Rashida Tlaib. I'm talking Ilhan Omar. I'm talking Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And by the way, these people are real human beings. Cori Bush. And these people are going to make mistakes, and that's okay. And we're going to hold them accountable because they can be held accountable. They're not Miss Kamala or, well, okay, let me be quiet. I'm just saying, you know who you can hold accountable.
We need to do this again. Can you just like in the last 25 seconds, like what do you say, how do you continue to be unbought? Like what is it that you do? And remind yourself. And
what do you mean?
Like how do you, it's hard, it's not easy. Sometimes you just want to like, you know, you don't forfeit any of your values.
Absolutely not, because like I'm one of those, I come from one of the most marginalized